Thank you. So I call this meeting of the Boston Region Metropolitan Planning Organization Administration and Finance Committee to order. It's 5 minutes past 9. Erin, do you mind doing a roll call so we can establish a quorum officially?
Yes. MBTA Advisory Board.
Brian Kane, present.
Metro West Regional Collaborative. I heard from Dennis that he will be here a little bit later. MassDOT.
Miranda Briseno representing MassDOT.
MAPC.
Eric Barassa with Metropolitan Area Plan Council.
Regional Transportation Advisory Council.
Leonard Dickens Advisory Council here.
And the City of Boston.
Hey, Jim Fitzgerald with BPDA.
All right, that calls the roll.
Thanks, Aaron. I'm going to read the notice of non-discrimination. You are invited to participate in our transportation planning process regardless of your race, color, national origin, including limited English proficiency, religion, creed, gender, ancestry, ethnicity, disability, age, sex, sexual orientation, gender identity or expression, veterans status, or background. And these are the meeting guidelines. All participants will join the meeting with muted microphones. Please rename yourself to include your first name, last name, and affiliation. You can mute and unmute yourselves. Always remain muted unless actively speaking. To participate in the discussion, please select the raise hand function. You can find this by clicking on either the participants button at the bottom of the screen, and a window will pop up with a raise hand button at the bottom, or the reactions button in the toolbar, and I will call upon participants as I see you. If you're on the phone, you can use *9 to raise your hand, and if you have any technical difficulties, please contact the amazing Erin McGuire via the chat box at emaguire@ctps.org or by phone at 857-702-3681. This is the accessibility statement. This meeting is accessible to people with disabilities. Zoom products are compliant with exceptions with the following standards: Web Content Accessibility Guidelines 2.1 Level AA standards and Revise Section 508 standards. If you require any additional accommodations in order to participate fully in this meeting, please contact Erin McGuire, MPO staff, via the chat, via email at emagUIRE@ctps.org, or by phone at 857-702-3681. Introductions. Good morning. We've already done introductions. We will now take public comment. Is there any member of the public who would like to make a comment? Please use the raise hand function, and we would love to hear from you. I don't see any hands jumping up. Okay, so we'll close public comment. We will now move on to our first agenda item, which is an update on the state fiscal year 2024 revenue and expense for the first quarter from Haral Gandhi. Take it away, Haral.
Thank you, Brian. Hello, good morning, everyone. My name is Haral Gandhi. I am the Director of Finance and Operations at CTPS. And then I also have Silva Ivazian with me. She's the project accountant at CTPS. Before we get started, I just wanted to go through the purpose of these meetings. We hold these quarterly updates. We provide quarterly updates to the committee. We started about a year ago to have these quarterly meetings, and this is just an opportunity for the committee members to get together, listen or discuss the revenue and the expenses throughout the year on a quarterly basis. And then it also provides an opportunity for the members to discuss or address any issues or topics that they want to talk through regarding any CTPS administrative or financial standings. We do welcome feedback. It's been about a year, so if there's any feedback on any other items that you'd like for us to bring to these meetings, or if there's any structural changes that you want to do to the meetings, we welcome this feedback. At the annual meeting, we're going to hopefully have members or new members join the committee, or it's just going to be a start of the new year. So this is a great opportunity to see if we can provide any additional information that's needed. So I think, next slide, please. Back in June, this committee and the MPO board approved the SFY 2024 budget, which was $7.85 million. And throughout the year, we do a straight line. We compare our actual revenue and expenses to a straight line projection. So each quarter looks a little bit different. Sometimes some quarters the revenue is higher than what the projected line item says, and then some quarters it would be less. But overall, this first quarter, we're in a good financial standing with our expenses and revenues pretty much balanced, and our overhead rate is pretty close to what we had projected for the year. So I will provide all the details of the finances in a few minutes, but I just wanted to say that right now our expenses and revenues are pretty close together at $1.57 million out of the 7.8. And this also means that we're operating at an overhead rate that is close to the 120% projected rate. So it's around 119%, which is good because even though our revenue and expenses are lower than the projected, they're balanced. So right now we're operating at a good rate. And then the most notable achievement that we saw in quarter one is that our recruitment efforts were very successful. We were able to, in July, August, and September, in the first 3 months, we were able to fill 4 full-time positions and 3 part-time positions. And then we continue to see that trend of successful recruitment throughout the second quarter as well. So since July, we've onboarded about 8 full-time staff members, and that hopefully we'll see an increase in revenue due to all the recruitment and the onboardings that we've done. After there will be an initial spike in the overhead because of all the recruitment efforts and the onboarding efforts, but then hopefully we'll see the revenue side of things go up. We also continue to work towards the goal of 61 full-time filled positions. We are currently at 54. Since our revenue is directly related to our staff count, we expect our revenue to increase in the second quarter, as I mentioned. And then one of the challenges that we encountered, even though it's an accomplishment for the recruitment, one of the challenges is that our revenue was a little bit lower because we didn't have as many staff members charging as we had projected, charging to the direct contracts. And also one of our major funding sources through the Safe Streets for All grant, the Vision Zero action plan, that the paperwork, the contract paperwork was a little bit delayed. So we didn't get to start that project until the later end of the first quarter in September. And so hopefully in quarter 2, we'll see an increase in revenue due to that funding source as well, and the start of the Vision Zero action plan project. I think, as I mentioned, we're in a good standing. On the other side of the coin, where I spoke about the revenue, but then the expenses, we were able to manage our expenses pretty close to our revenue stream. And we also saw lower than expected expenses in quarter 1. So we were able to adjust some expenses that we would typically expense over 12 months. We were able to recognize the full expense in the first quarter, which would give us flexibility in the future quarters to, if anything comes up, or to make up for that overhead. So it was good that our expenses were lower, and then we were able to manage how we recognize those expenses in the first quarter. So now I'm going to hand it over to Silva to give you a more detailed presentation on the numbers. Silva.
Yes, thank you, Harel. Good morning, everyone. Next slide, please, Erin. Thank you. Before I actually get into the details, I want to remind you all that our operating budget operates on the state fiscal year, and the numbers I'll be presenting are actual revenue received and expenses incurred for the period of July 1st through September 30th, 2023. So looking at our first slide here, this slide shows a summary of our revenue and expenses through quarter 1, broken down by month. Looking at the overall picture here, we started the quarter with our expenses being higher than our revenue. This was primarily due to July being the first month of our state fiscal year, where a number of our major admin-related expenses are due, which is why we saw a deficit in the month for this quarter. As the quarter progressed, we saw an increase in our revenue in August, and August was actually August had the highest revenue of the months in the quarter. And this was primarily, or excuse me, one of the reasons for the higher revenue in August is that there were no holidays in August. And so there were more chargeable work days. So we finished the month of August with a surplus of $3,000. Similarly, looking at the month of September, our revenue and expenses were close. Our revenue was a little bit over our expenses for the month, and we saw a surplus in September of $6,600. Overall, through quarter one, we saw a total surplus of $2,600, and we ended the quarter with our overhead rate being at 119.3%, which is quite close to our projected overhead rate for the year of 120.30%. Next slide, please, Erin. Thank you. So this graph here represents our projected revenue in the blue bars versus our actual revenue received in the orange bars for the first quarter. Overall, our revenue sources are grouped in categories. And the categories include MPO and MassDOT directed PL funds, which include projects in the UPWP. One of our other categories are SPR funded projects. We have a category MassDOT Other. This MassDOT Other category includes projects such as our MassDOT On-Call contract. We have our MBTA category, which includes projects such as the MBTA Fare Equity Analysis, the NTD, and the Red-Blue Connector Study, along with other projects, of course. Those are just a few examples. And lastly, we have the other category, which includes contracts with other municipalities that we've received throughout the quarter, as well as starting this year, as Harel mentioned, we have our Safe Streets for All grant. And so all the revenue that we see in the Safe Streets for All grant will be included in the other category that we have here. Looking at the first two categories, we are, for the MPO and the MassDOT directed, as well as our SPR funded projects, overall, we're charging about 80 to 85% of what we had projected for quarter one. For our MassDOT Other projects, we received about 50% of what we had projected for the quarter. Now, our MBTA category, as we see here, we actually our charges exceeded our projections for the quarter. So we had projected about $165,000 for the quarter, but we actually saw charges closer to $185,000. To provide some detail on that, in quarter one, we actually had 14 active projects. And so that's why we saw such an increase in our MBTA revenue. And again, lastly, our other category, we had expected $162,000 for quarter one of SFY24, but we actually charged closer to $30,000. And one of the reasons that we charged about 20% of what we had projected was due to the Safe Streets for All grant that Harel mentioned earlier. We had actually received, we had thought that we were going to begin this work in May, but we didn't start work until September because we received there was some kind of delay in terms of the paperwork. So we couldn't start charging to this contract until September. But overall, looking at our total column on the far right, we had projected a revenue of $1.9 million for quarter one. But we actually charged about 80% of that at closer to $1.6 million. Next slide, excuse me. Thank you. So our next slide here shows a graph of our projected expenses in the blue bars versus our actual expenses in the orange bars. Again, our expenses are broken down into three major categories. We have admin-related expenses, which cover our fixed expenses such as our rent, staff-related expenses such as fringe benefits, as well as IT-related expenses. We have our second category being direct labor, which are our staff salaries. And thirdly, we have our direct costs category. Overall, through quarter one, we had expected our expenses to be at 1.8 million, but we finished the quarters seeing our expenses closer to 1.6 million. Again, similar to our revenue, our expenses were at about 85% of what we had projected through quarter one. Again, we'll be keeping a closer eye on our expenses and revenue for the rest of the year to ensure that we meet our projections as the quarters progress. That's it for me. Thank you all for your attention, and please let us know if there are any questions. Thank you, Erin.
Thank you, Silva. All set, Harel?
Yes, we do. Yes. Are there any questions?
Cool. Questions for Harel or Silva? And I just wanted to note that about a year ago, folks probably remember we asked the finance team to start doing these quarterly updates. Again, not because there was any concern or fear, but just so that we could be educated and understand kind of what's going on in the financial health of CTPS. From the presentations, it seems to me that at least through Q1, the health is quite good, and that things are certainly moving according to plan. So this might be a short, boring meeting, but in terms of finance and administration, short and boring is often what we want. So I just wanted to commend Harel and Silva and the whole team for keeping everything moving. It's great to see that the overhead rate is close to the projected rate. I know that that's always a moving target and hard to achieve. So kudos for that. I know a lot of it is outside of everyone's control, but in terms of financial forecasting, I think things are moving pretty well, and you guys are doing a great job. So I have no concerns, and I just wanted to, great to receive the update. Great to know that things are moving forward. And I guess if anyone has any questions, now's the time. Otherwise, we can move on. Eric has the halo effect working on his Zoom screen right now, so he thinks you're all very angelic.
I have no questions. I think this is great. I appreciate the presentation. Thank you.
Absolutely. Okay, great. Thank you, Harel. Thank you, Silva. All right, we'll move on to item 4, Executive Director Goals Update. Tegan Tyke.
That's me. Thank you, Brian. Also, this is going to be an update, and as with, as Harel said at the beginning, I also welcome any feedback you have on how you'd like to carry these updates forward, just because we have just started doing this in practice. And so, again, I'll welcome your feedback. So I'm going to talk to you about the progress towards goals that I set for myself and the agency in my annual reviews. I'll talk about updates quarterly on progress towards those goals. And I feel like it's very important that I say right off the bat that these are not goals that I can in any way accomplish by myself. These are goals I set for the agency. And so therefore, I am absolutely working with many, many other members on the staff quite a bit. And they are putting also a lot of work and effort into advancing these goals. So this is not about me taking credit for those goals, but I think it's important to lay them out because it sort of represents my priorities with the agency and then how well we're able to kind of jointly together work together towards realizing those goals. So with that preamble, if we can go to the next slide, please. So what I'm going to do is just sort of summarize what's in the memo that was posted. I had hoped to get the memo to you a bit earlier than I did, but the first time of creating the memo, it took a little longer. I think the subsequent updates will be a little easier and quicker to do. And so I can give you more advanced time to look at and read the memo. So just to summarize what's in there, so reminder of the process, that what's been established in the operations plan is that each state fiscal year, so that's the year beginning July 1, I will be evaluated by representatives of the chair seat, the vice chair seat for the MPO board, and the chair of the A&F committee, which is Brian Kane. This practice has evolved and just sort of been codified from prior practices, which looked a little different. So this is what we'll do going forward. And then the expectation is that I will come to the A&F committee and provide quarterly updates about progress towards those goals. And then we can discuss, and if needed, we can discuss whether it makes sense to update those goals as the year progresses. Next slide, please. So I did my last evaluation before we had really established this path forward. So the way I wrote my goals in the evaluation itself just needed a little bit of packaging, I think, to be able to give you good updates. So we looked at those and I packaged them in these 5 areas. And I think going forward, I'll try to structure it so that it's compatible with making this kind of update. But I packaged them together in terms of those that were focused more on the employees, their experience with the agency and retention of employees, board members, working towards board priorities, and also the experience that board members have in their service. And then in the area of fiscal responsibility and funding, much of which we have already talked about today, sector leadership for the agency as a whole, how we're really leading in the transportation field. And then we have this 5-year strategic plan that we are implementing, and we are in year 3 of the implementation of that plan. So those are my main goal areas. Next slide. In the employee section of those goals, or grouping of those goals, I called out a number of priorities. We have been engaged in an ongoing update of the policies and procedures. We have well codified employee and agency policies and procedures through our intranet, which is our internal resource. A number of them have really deserved a second, third, fourth, whatever it is, look and updating to try to make sure that they are employee focused, employee centric, and to ensure that we're following good kind of state of the practice to give employees good benefits. And we've been working with MAPC very closely and to make sure that we're working with their team, and where appropriate and feasible, kind of updating those policies and procedures and benefits together. And where it's really policies and procedures for CTPS, our agency, we're updating those and just coordinating with MAPC on those updates. Haral also already she mentioned our recruitment efforts. This continues to be a major priority for us. As we all know, it has been very difficult and challenging over the last number of years to really effectively recruit within the job market and the competitiveness of the job market. So we've been working to improve our practices and how we carry out recruitment, be more effective, more efficient. And as Haral mentioned, we've brought on 8 full-time, in addition some part-time staff since July 1. And that's really strong, particularly because we haven't seen any resignations of those full-time staff positions on our staff. So it's really been a good growth for us. We also have plans to really enhance the process of onboarding, and really more orienting, I think is maybe a better word that should be used here, and kind of really bringing our new employees into the agency. We have also launched something we've been working to stand up over the last couple of years, a diversity, equity, and inclusion focused committee to really work to improve both the ability of the agency to be inclusive and overcome barriers to inclusion, and also really support the employee experience at the agency. And then we've also developed a more robust strategy for professional development, where we have a plan now laid out for the year that helps us really prioritize within the budget that we've established. First, it helps us establish an appropriate budget, but then also prioritize how we are getting employees to these different professional development opportunities throughout the year. Next slide. So the next category is oriented around the board. I think you all are pretty familiar with a lot of the progress we've made here. We have, this group put a lot of work and effort, and I thank you for that. We have completed that operations plan and also the initial update to the Memorandum of Understanding for the MPO, which addressed the corrective action that was in the federal certification report. So that's a big step. And now we are moving forward with the additional work in that area, which is we have been able to, as staff, support the ad hoc committees meeting 3 times and develop recommendations for how to move forward with further, some more challenging updates to the MOU. And that recommendation will be presented at the annual meeting on the 30th. We have also launched together a new transportation improvement program, process engagement and readiness committee, that kicked off in October. And I'd say that's an incredibly positive step towards the goals and the needs of the board, and also my goals in terms of us being able to better support the board in informed decision-making. And then another area that I'm really proud of being able to work towards is looking outside of our individual MPO and looking to the best practices across the nation, or just practices in general, and getting resources through our membership to the Association of Metropolitan Planning Organizations. There's been a lot of activity there. Staff have been going to participate in their forums and conferences on the board. I've had a lot of direct interaction with other MPOs and the resources that AMPO is developing. And now we also have a member of AMPO staff coming to our annual meeting to talk about kind of the national policy and funding framework. Next slide. Also related to the board, lots of activity here. We are launching this annual meeting. It has been a lot of work in a really positive way. And I think it's really transforming how we think about what our board meetings can be. So again, many thanks to this group for thinking through what that annual meeting could and should look like and recommending that to the board. And we look forward to seeing you on the 30th. We will be continuing the in-person meeting opportunities for the board following that. We've talked about 3 to 4 times a year. And so staff will continue to support that. And then we have another bigger initiative where we have a sort of approach to giving new board members orientation towards what the board does, the sort of 101. We're looking to develop a more robust onboarding and then ongoing development practice, giving opportunities for the board to continue to engage in learning. And we will be doing that going forward. We have been working first to make sure we have the management team in place we needed. And now that we have that in place for the MPO activities team and the policy and planning team, we can move forward with working on this initiative. Next slide. In the fiscal and funding area, again, you've actually, I think, heard a lot. Sorry, a cat joining me. You've heard a lot about that already from Haral and Silva. We are maintaining a net positive position. We are in, I think, good health, good balance in these initial months of the state fiscal year. So I won't go more into that since you just got that presentation. We are also continuing to work on updating the fiduciary agent agreement with the Metropolitan Area Planning Council, MEPC. That's really important just to set up a really consistent and updated framework. And it's not just related to the fiscal side of the practice as the fiduciary agent, but a big piece of it is the coordination in the financial side of the agency and how we work. And then also I want to highlight a really excellent opportunity that you all know that we have been able to succeed in as a board and staff. We have this significant Safe Streets and Roads for All federal discretionary grant that's supporting the development of a regional Vision Zero action plan. And we are kicking off that work. An RFP is out or is going out, and we are starting to recruit for the working group, or the task force. And we are in the stages of hiring a new staff person to oversee this initiative. Next slide. Sector leadership. It's been a really exciting week for me, but it's really a culmination of at least 3 years of extremely hard work at this point. But we have worked we took a hard look at particularly our most robust tool that we use as an agency to support stakeholders, to support other agencies, and that's the travel demand model, and determined that we needed to really build kind of a new version from the ground up so that we could make it created in a different framework where it would be extremely well documented. It could be kind of communicated and shared. And that's the key thing, is that we are now structuring it so it can be shared more broadly. And that will help move us into being thought leaders in the area of travel demand modeling, and because we can really work with our partners, get feedback on how those modeling tools are working, and also really embark in research to develop kind of additional tools related to the travel demand model that'll really help enhance our work. So we had an unveiling this week where mostly Marty Milkovits presented on what the new model looks like and how it would be shared going forward. And then there'll be a lot more work going forward to kind of communicate with folks and to get it into a place where we're sharing both the model and also the feedback and uses of the model. So that's been a really big one that this week has been very exciting for me. Another ongoing effort that we've been engaged in that is kicking back up again in kind of full force. We've sort of pivoted into a particular area of project management, and now we're going back into sort of the broader area of project management. We have a project management working group that is kicking off, and we'll be also really considering further training and enhancement in this project management skills within our agency. And then also, this was a big focus for the leadership team during our leadership retreat and oriented towards a lot of our strategic initiatives through our strategic plan. We knew we needed to fill a gap between how we work as a staff between the long range vision and plan and the sort of annual work plan when we're talking about that's the UPWP, when we're talking about how we organize our work. And so we're shifting into a kind of a structured framework with all of the program managers who together do really a large bulk of the core work of the MPO, and shifting them into a multi-year visioning and work planning process that will then feed into the annual work plans that go into the UPWP. So I'm happy to talk more about that initiative. It's hard to put in one bullet, but that's another area that as a leadership team, we're really embracing and building on. And then next slide. I think this is the last content slide. Lots of the things that I have already talked about actually do directly overlap with activities that have been planned out in the third year of the strategic plan. They are not all exactly the same, but I just want to call out that the strategic plan is really embedded in a number of the other goals and activities that I've mentioned. There are a few other activities that are in the strategic plan that we're looking forward to advancing this year. And that is around assessing and ideally identifying funding and a path forward for carrying out a communications and branding exercise, engaging a consultant to help us with that, and then associated web improvements as well. I'm sorry, there's some repeated bullet points here. I must have missed that as I was doing it. And then lastly, we are also currently about to engage in a consultant. We're about to put out an RFP to develop an ITS plan for the agency that will help us with our technology infrastructure moving forward. So I think next slide, last slide. So again, happy to dig into any of these. There's a little bit more information about each of them, I believe, in the memo. But if there's anything else you'd like to know, I'm happy to talk. And then also happy to get your feedback as to whether this format works for you. If you would like a different format, in terms of either the pre-materials or the discussion at the committee meeting today. Thank you.
Thanks, Tegan. Great job. I mean, this is never easy, especially when you're talking about yourself. I'm going through a similar process right now, and it's not very fun, but you're doing a great job, and thank you. And as I think you've taken the role, the position, in a kind of a long way in the last 2 or 3 years that you've been doing this through a pandemic. You've sort of restructured it and put a lot of the policies and procedures and back office requirements in place that might have been missing in the past. I think CTPS has always operated very closely together, and maybe these policies weren't sort of needed 3, 4, 5 years ago, but they certainly are needed today. And I just want to definitely commend you for the work that you've done there and putting this in place. It's not easy, and I like I said, I think you're doing a great job. But I cannot say anything as eloquently as Leonard Diggins can. So Leonard, please go ahead.
Brian, I can imagine how hard it is for you going through this process, where you have to pretend to be humble when you want to say, I'm great. I'm great. I know I'm great. But anyway,
I know Tegan's great.
But anyways, so no, this is great, Tegan. In fact, I was going to ask you, and in fact, I'm thinking, just contemplate this as we go through the first maybe year or two of this. I mean, if this is the right tempo for you, because I mean, I've gotten to the point now where I'm phobic when someone says, let's do something on a quarterly basis. It's like, ooh, that's a lot, and unless the feedback, the presentation and the feedback is going to be meaningful. Can we do it twice a year? But this is the first year, so let's see how it goes for you. And I think that'll really depend on whether we provide you with helpful feedback. And so I was going to ask, did I miss anything about the MUC, that is the MOU Update Committee?
Oh, the MUC. It was a bullet point, which does not, in fact, represent the full scale of the MUC, I guess, if that's how you think of it. It is in here, but again, I mean, there's so much going on that I can. This is why I'm happy to talk about any individual item further. So we as staff did support, this ad hoc committee that had several of you on it. In going through 3 meetings, which was what they were tasked with doing from the full board, to talk about the process that makes sense to develop the MOU and make that recommendation to the board in November at the annual meeting. So what that meant was it was 3 meetings of kind of process and topic discussion, kind of like what the board saw when you first saw the memo about the operations plan, which kind of proposed this is what should happen. It should go to the A&F committee. It should have these topics. Do you agree? And if so, we'll launch that process. So that's what this ad hoc committee over the last 3 meetings has done, and staff has supported them in kind of developing a framework for the process and the topics to be covered. They'll make the recommendation at the annual meeting about how to move forward with that. So that's where we're at with that. And then staff will need to support the process forward from there. And there's also, we've already identified that a number of the proposed updates to the MOU really are going to be staff driven, kind of content updates. And then there are some that are really more oriented around board decision making and making policy decisions around, for example, like membership of the board and those sorts of things.
Yeah, I'm sorry. So I did miss it because to me it is a significant effort on staff's part. So if you hadn't put it there, I was going to say that is something big the staff is doing. So great, thank you.
Absolutely.
I like the MUC, Len. That's good. That's good.
Okay.
So Tegan, do you feel like you've got enough feedback from us? It sounds like folks are mostly happy with the format and the tempo. I think Len's right. Let's keep this going quarterly to start. And if, we find that we can move it to a little bit less or a little bit more, we can make that adjustment in year 2. But if you think you got everything from us, I think we're good.
Absolutely. And I think this is maybe the heavier content memo. I think for the later quarters, it'll be more like adding kind of what's happened over the last couple of months. So I don't think it'll feel like quite the big hit of information. So I think I'm happy to work with you and see how that goes this year.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot we can do here. We could make this very visual or very text heavy. There's, a lot of ways to do this, but we will work together to figure this out. And I'm sure that this committee, and I think I speak for everybody, is really pulling for you and everyone on the CTPS team to succeed. So thank you. I think that was our last agenda item. Member items. Does anybody have a member item? I put in the chat the recording yesterday with our chair, Monica Tibbetts-Nutt. So you can watch that if you so choose. Look forward to seeing her at the annual meeting. And unless there's any member items, we can discuss when our next meeting is. We'll figure that out. It's November, so we'll probably get together in 2024, if not beforehand, but unlikely in December. So we'll see everybody in 2024 in this capacity. We'll see everybody at the annual meeting in a couple of weeks. And I wonder if anybody would like to make a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn. Thanks. This is great. Appreciate the call.
Without objection, we are adjourned. Thanks, everybody. Have a great rest of your day.
End of the year, everything.
Thanks, all.